I didn't have a conversation with my family, like, outwardly about not having kids until my second major relationship, and the pressure was on, all the stereotypical ways that I feel like every mother pressures their daughter to find out, like, "Is it in the cards? What's happening? Oh my goodness, mm." I chose to write her a letter, and I sent it to her on Mother's Day.
Welcome to In Her Words. This podcast is for women navigating through change, career, identity, motherhood, and just figuring out what's next. I'm Roberta Dombrowski, host of In Her Words and founder of Learn Mindfully. Each episode, I sit down with women who are asking big questions, navigating transitions, and trying to make sense of life as it shifts. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need space to be real. Let's get into it. With me today, I have Stacey Messier. She is the general manager for CIC New England, running the Boston, Cambridge, and Providence innovation campuses. She's a fierce advocate for the intersection of innovation and community. Prior to working in the community building space, she ran customer experience teams for online education, insurance, and music software. She's an entrepreneur at heart, having run her own design agency as well as a 3D cake company back when Cake Boss was hot on TV. You can always find Stacey bringing the fun and funky into the professional realm through fashion and frameworks. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to dive in today. When we are talking about topics, I feel like this is a perfect topic for you and I to explore. It's a little bit of taboo. It's the idea of motherhood and the decision to have children or to not have children. And I'm excited because it's not often talked about in spaces or openly. And so, what better people? I am a mom of a 5.5-year-old right now. And then, yeah, we'll hear about your journey as well.
Wait, not 5.5-year-olds, 5.5 months?
5.5-month-old. Did I say 5.5-year-old?
You did, but that
I'm
sounds
projecting.
that rolls off the tongue so much easier than month-old.
Month old, yeah. I'm projecting of the age I hope to see him in, and I'm excited for. So, yeah. I guess let's dive in. Do you have children, Stacey?
I do not have any human children, nor do I have any animal children, actually. That's the funny part. I think most people are like, "Oh, she's a dog mom." No, no, we don't have any of those either. Just very different kinds of babies. Art babies,
Yeah.
creation babies, different
Yeah.
kinds, different kinds. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What informed your decision to not have, it could be even dog children or, yeah, why no animals? Why no children?
Ooh, yeah. Well, let's start with the human kids. So my mom had one hell of a bout with infertility for 8 years before I arrived on the scene, and her mother had a really difficult pregnancy as well. I think the facts, I may get this wrong, but I think my mom was pronounced dead and alive twice
Wow.
during her own birth. And then my grandmother, her mother, ended up passing away when my mom was 3. So that being part one, it seems like the odds are pretty stacked against me. And hearing about the pain that my mom went through as she was trying to get pregnant for so, so long, like I don't know if I want to put myself through that if my genetics are similar, because it seems like it's not skipping a generation. It seems like it's got a likelihood. Then fast forward to, I think when I was in high school, I really started to understand the impact that humans would have on our planet. And I really started to dig into the data around overpopulation and natural resources, the impact that we're having now, as you well know, right? Like, we've been talking climate change and renewable energy and how do we solve these problems, 30, 40 years later, and it's still pretty top of mind. But I would say those were the two big kickers. And then in terms of pets, I just travel way too much. I'm big on the fairness to the animal. Otherwise, like, why am I paying to have a pet that I'm only going to put in doggy daycare or a kennel? So until my partner and I have a lifestyle that really supports having the pets and we can actually be in their lives as much as they're in our lives, it just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why I always thought that you had a cat. Not dog person, but
Oh,
cat, yeah.
growing up, I grew up in a house with 3 cats and a dog. That's
Okay.
always I'm very much living vicariously through my family members and my friends and all of their pets. And I absolutely did. You probably remember from when I was doing my own writing and that memoir stories, right? Of the cat that lived to be 21 and he was a tuxedo
Yes.
cat. He lived to be old enough to hunt down his own martini. So, these were the things.
Yes, of course. I love what you share around what you're essentially talking about is intergenerational trauma around birth because it's not spoken about. I think that a lot of people inherit at least like the grandparents pressuring you, like your mother or grandmother pressuring you. They're like, when are you having kids? When's the family gonna grow? Usually that's the pressure. And there's another side of it. You and I have both talked about my husband is an only child of two only children.
He is one like me, which is so
Yes.
rare. We are
We
rare
don't
on
hear
this
about
planet.
it often. Yeah. And I feel like when you are raised in that environment, you don't necessarily have the urge to have even one child, let alone like a whole van full of children.
A brood, as it were.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm curious as we talk about the decision to not have kids, did you have to have a conversation with your family members about it? Was there the pestering, the when are we having kids?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's like the moment you're in a happy relationship with another person, they're like, "So, when's the big day? And then when's the next big day? How many you gonna pop out?" And I'm like, "Oh, man." I didn't have a conversation with my family, like, outwardly about not having kids until my second major relationship. So I was with my ex for 10 years, and it was pretty clear that we operated very independently and that it might not be in the cars. We were also entrepreneurs together. We did a lot together. And that was probably the first instance of being like, well, the business is like a child. And so caring for the startup is very much in its own right, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, if they are entrepreneurs or thinking about it, right? Like you have to give so much of your life and your time to that business in a way that can pull you away from other things, family and friends included. And then when I met my now husband, my parents were like, "Oh, she seems so happy. What's going to happen?" And the pressure was on all the stereotypical ways that I feel like every mother pressures their daughter to
Yeah.
find out, like, is it in the cards? What's happening? Oh my goodness. I got to a point where the way that communication back then with my mom is often pretty good, but it really wasn't a topic I could sit down and actually have a voice-to-voice conversation, so I chose to write her a letter, and I sent it to her on Mother's Day.
What a gift.
Yeah, but not as like an FU, but much more so like, "On this day to celebrate you, I need you to know that while I won't be able to celebrate Mother's Day in the same way that you do, I want you to know that just as I was saying before, right? The business, my creativity, the art that I make, my relationships are like children to me. It takes a lot of my energy to nurture and care for the people that I really care about most and also the people that I'm responsible for, right? Like I feel like we talk about getting married like very willy-nilly or very whimsically,
Yeah.
but ultimately, that is a thing that deserves its own level of investment and time and care. So I spent some time writing and then eventually got to like a letter that I liked that both thanked her and acknowledged her for what she has done for me, but also explained why human kids are not in the cards. But I need you to know that there are all of these other things that I have birthed over the years. And some live and some die, some live on and will be perpetual, some we don't know, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But ultimately, motherhood for me is going to look very different than it did for you. And I want you to be okay with that. The other thing that was important in that moment was also she was getting a lot of peer pressure because they had moved
Oh,
to
I'm
a
sure like the mom group, like her friends are just like having kid.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
They had moved to a retirement community where the grandmothers were having grandmother parties
Oh
for
my
each other,
gosh.
and so she was experiencing all of this around her,
Yeah.
and we can all empathize with the level of pressure that happens in any of those similar scenarios. So
Yeah.
I also spent some time in that letter acknowledging what she must be feeling, but also like don't let it eat into your brain. That's not you,
Yeah.
me. We are our own people. We are different and it's okay.
Yeah. Comparison really is the thief of joy.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah. And it's wild when it's other people's comparisons that are impacting you or their children as well. I feel like it's an added layer that you have to navigate within the conversation. How did it go? Did she respond with a letter? Did she respond verbally?
She responded in a very Irish Catholic way, which was just simply to acknowledge that she received it, and
Okay.
then that was it.
Yep, yep, yep.
But I will say it worked. We didn't
Nice.
we didn't have to talk about it again. I didn't have to hear the pressure comments.
Yeah, yeah.
So the commentary from her side changed drastically, and
Yeah.
ultimately that is really what the goal was.
Yeah. I love that because it's essentially the letter is like an act. It's a boundary setting with your mother about what to expect and expectations. And I got similar from my own mother. She was pressuring her and my grandmother, who was at the time, they're like, you need to move home. You need to move to Buffalo. Like, we can help raise the kids. And I hadn't even said at that point that I wanted to have a child.
Oh my
It was just
goodness.
it was just
The
like, "You need
fast
to
forward
change."
jump.
Yeah, super fast forward, and it was a series of long conversations of just, like, "Stop asking me about it," because I think what people don't often consider when they're pressuring family members like that is, like, what if we were trying and we had lost the baby? Like, there's so much that goes into birthing experiences and processes that
There's also so much decision making, like,
so much, so much. And I think people who don't have children probably think about it a bit more than people who do.
even in preparation for our chat today, like I was reflecting on a conversation I had last year with a colleague of mine that was like, they have a 1-year-old now, and they wanted to pick my brain about what it was like to be an only child, but then also to help make that decision over, do we have more than one? What's the benefit? What's
Yeah,
the downfalls? And so I think our generation is very conscious and overwhelmed by the amount of factors that go into deciding whether or not to have a kid. Whereas like our parents and our grandparents' generation was like,
it's very
what are you doing
different.
the thing? You're doing
Yeah,
the thing that
yeah.
you're supposed to be doing.
So true, so true. My thing that I've been saying now with my, husband is I didn't know when I was having a kid that I was giving up my nighttime routine for really until probably the age of 8 is what I'm guessing at this point, of,
Yeah.
like, bedtime, story time, bath, all of that, and, like, it's a slow acceptance for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, these are the factors, these are the
Yeah,
factors that
yeah,
show up, but it's
yeah,
also like, and it's a wonderful reason to give that thing up or to have to change,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
okay.
It's an identity shift. It's an identity shift for sure.
What factors went into you and Scott thinking about whether or not you were gonna say yes to having a kid?
For me, it was I've always been I hate using the word caretaker, but that's really what the role that I've worn in a lot of my family system. When I was younger, like I had family members getting sick. I had a niece too, and I just loved like whenever I was around kids as a teenager and like early 20s, you could just tell. Like I loved being around children. I loved being around my niece. I feel like it shifts me out of the I'm very analytical in my head and I overanalyze a lot, and when I'm around children, I am just fully present and creative and so
That's so interesting.
yeah, that was huge, and then also the fact that I was adopted was also a deciding factor. I had never met anyone with my genetics, DNA, anything like that, and so I always wanted a kid, and I was like, "Well, it's gonna be my son's gonna be the first person that I meet with my DNA and genetics," and it was very, like, powerful moment in the birth, and really, like, the last few years I'm in my, like, early mid-30s now. Me and Scott were talking about kids, and I was like, "Alright, we have to decide, like, is it go or no go? And he's like, I would really regret like not having a kid. And I was like, yeah, me too.
All
So
right.
that was like the decision. And I think one of the things too that was really exciting about having a kid is like being able to, you look at the world in a different way. You can experience things through their eyes. Like, because I honestly don't remember a lot of my childhood. Like, there was a lot of trauma and just adversity. And so now, even like we're watching Curious George on TV the other day. I was like, "Oh my God, this is so fun." Like, I don't remember this. It's just you're experiencing different parts of lives in different way now. So,
Yeah. I remember during lockdown, during like the height of the pandemic, and talking to
hmm
some of my colleagues that were moms or parents of all varieties. And one of the most powerful things that I learned from them was they're like, you know what? When you have a bad day and you go outside with your kid and they're just counting the number of ants because they just learned to
yep,
count. And
yeah,
they're so excited to count, but also see these little creatures that they can actually poke and stare at with their own eyes
yeah,
in a way
yeah.
that brings so much focus and so much joy. And it's so simple.
Yes,
And
yes.
such a good reminder to your point of just like, how do you find that presence, but then also
Mm,
joy in the simplest forms?
yes, yeah, yeah. It's so true. Shifting back to you and your experience, you mentioned that your decision not to have children is because you consider your creative practices like your children, like your babies. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about what is that journey with creativity? What does that look like? How does it show up for you in your life?
Yeah, such a great question. So I am a fine art trained artist. So my degree is actually in painting. I went to art school for college. I spent time as a kid going to Saturday art classes and really sort of honed my skills all throughout both childhood all the way into full adulthood. And then it wasn't until I think 20, when did we move into our apartment in GP? 2016, where I really started to develop my own style after college. Because in art school in college, you always end up having to create editions, basically like a large series of work, whether it's in a specific medium, like whether you're painting, you're printing, you're designing, you're doing whatever it might be. But in 2016, I just had to create a piece for our living room in this very funky apartment that we had. And so I just made three different concepts and was like, okay, this concept that has a very sort of like mid-century modern vibe, kind of nods to Joseph Albers, nods to Kandinsky, really sort of set me on a path where I was like, oh, wow, I really like painting in this style. This is new. This is fresh. Let me see where I can take this. And so it sort of it took on a life of its own is
Yeah.
probably the best way to put it, where it just like the style, the intention, the developing of this like huge body of work over a number of years. And so last year in 2024, I spent a lot of time trying to find homes for that body of work because I got to a point where I was like, I feel like this concept and this style has now grown up and it's ready to fly the nest and it's also ready to leave my brain in a way that now leaves room for me to think about art differently and what are the artistic concepts that I want to both learn from that past series but then also spend time really developing almost like a new visual language. And so lately I've been spending time. I became a finalist for a public art project, which is really exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if just the opportunity to get to work on something like this. So essentially it's a minimum of 13 pieces that will go into a 3-floor classroom building. And to think at this scale, to also have to develop visual language that helps you understand, are you on the first, second, or third floor? And then to also be like, wow, this is such a different way and a different type of thinking that I need to bring everything I learned from being a graphic designer as well as like a product designer into play.
Yeah.
And now that I work in physical spaces in commercial real estate, there's like all of these things that are just sort of a whirlwind tornado in my mind as I'm developing these concepts and trying to get this proposal together. But it is very much like you sort of you have to give it space for it to grow in its own time. Like, you can't
Mm.
force it to happen.
Mhm.
And I hear a lot of my friends that are parents say very similar things, right? I think our parents also realized that the kid that you thought we would be versus the kid that we always were.
Yeah.
And whether you felt that, like, we were gonna be carbon copies of our parents versus, like, we are very
Yep.
much our own individuals, right? Like, art is very
Yeah.
similar. Very, very similar. Like, you can tell it that it needs to wear a solid black coat, but actually it only wants to wear the zebra printed one with neon green in the inside. That was me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always use the metaphor of gardening because, as you know, like, love gardening over here, but it's like you can set the conditions for something to grow. Like, you till the soil, you plant the seed, you water, but like, there could be a monsoon tomorrow. Like, could be just like tornadoes that rip it up and all of this stuff. And so it's like you set the constraints, you set the environment, and then it's going to have its own life when it starts to grow. I feel that way about creative life and parenthood.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I'm curious because you talked about the constraints of physical spaces and now building. A few years ago, you did a mural in one of the CIC buildings too. What was that experience like of shifting to the physical world versus the digital world when you're creating?
Oh man. Let's see. So let me give an overview, just a quick high level of what
Yeah.
my process is. So typically my pieces start with a quote or a phrase because making abstract art out of nothing is really challenging. And so I need something to go off of, and years of doing branding work and logos in graphic design sort of like set me up to be like, okay, I need something that then helps my mind create that visual language. Do
Yeah.
a bunch of sketches, bring those sketches into a program like Adobe Illustrator, and then really push and pull the pixels in order to get like very precise and sort of like figure out what the layout and the concept actually is and how it might be. Sometimes I yank it back out and do some hand painted, test drives. Other times, if my color palette is already developed and ready to go, then I'll just sit there digitally and play around with the color palette that's been assigned. And then we turn it into a painting, usually a canvas painting. I will say that, like, over time, I made one piece that was, what is it? It's a 36 by 36. She's a big girl. But I remember feeling how free and fantastic it felt to work on something so large that caused my whole body to have to move as I was painting. And so getting into this mural project was such an exercise in whole body movement and your body becoming even more ingrained in both the art making and the art itself. But the most fun part of that mural, so it's a 93-foot long wall. It was just blank and boring, and we had trouble selling offices that looked out onto a blank and boring white wall.
Yeah.
And so, in partnership with my staff, we created a couple of different concepts, mocked them up. They voted on their favorite, and then we actually turned it into a community mural day project. So, what we ended up doing was basically making the wall like a giant coloring book. So, all of the outlines told you
Yeah.
what color was going to go on the inside of the shape. And we brought almost 30 people together to
Oh
paint
my
that
gosh.
thing over one day. And it came together in 7 days total. Myself and our in-house painter ended up doing a bunch of the finishing touches, but it was such an incredible project to sort of do something that was literally like life size, but then
Yeah.
also to give the gift of fill in a circle, paint this arrow, make its blue feel like an ocean, and away you go. And the client had such a good time. I just remember so many people being like, can we do this every week? Can we just have
It's
paint
art
day like every
therapy.
week?
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And I'm curious because you talked about a little bit about the element of like control and giving up control. I imagine when it's a mural, it's like you are no longer controlling any part of, like, you have the intention, but when you got 30 people coming in to
Right.
paint this with you, like, what was that like for you?
It was surprising how comfortable I was in
Mm,
giving brushes and paint to all of the people. Again, like what you were saying about gardening, right? Like, we just set up the
yeah.
environment to be as user friendly as possible. So that way it was, pretty clear which paint needed to go where, but also if people had questions or, I could see if somebody was having trouble. So then the facilitator in me would come out and be like, maybe you need to use a mini roller instead of a
Yeah,
paintbrush.
yeah. Yeah.
And then would switch out the tool and be like, oh my God, this is so much better. Okay, great. But even down to drawing like and mapping out the shapes of the mural with just pencil on the actual wall,
Mm,
it's a hallway. It's not
yeah.
like one gigantic room where I can put a projector at the back side of it and then just I was able to map a portion of it, maybe like a quarter of it, using a very like short range projector. But it got to a point where it was like, it doesn't even matter. I just need to draw this thing. And I made
Yeah,
like
yeah.
cardboard templates for the big circles that end up being all over the dots that are towards the end. And then just made sure that the angles were it's like going back to before we knew we were doing geometry in grade school, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you make an arrow have equidistant triangles at the top? So it was really pulling on like grade school level math skills to make
Yeah,
sure that
yeah.
these big, 8-foot tall arrows that might be 3 feet wide were
Yeah.
actually proportional.
Yeah, yeah. That was like the stuff that because I did undergrad in publishing. That was like the stuff I nerded out about. Like, give me a piece of paper and a ruler, and like I could tear them. Just
Yeah, I totally get that.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned the act of having such a big piece. It's almost like you said whole body mural, and it's almost like what it brings to mind is this act of embodiment when you are putting things together creatively and having pieces come together. And I'm curious, is there a part of embodiment within your creative practice? And how does that even vary from like software products versus painting? Because I imagine it's very different.
Say more about what you mean by embodiment, the way that you see it.
I could write a dissertation, but I guess let me give like an example, and this might be my own bias too. I don't want it to color you, but like when I am as a researcher or like a product designer designing something, it is very much like screen, computer, like I even talk to some designers and they're like, "Oh, I hate being in front of the computer. I'm like crouching down trying to get this thing out." Versus if I am even sewing or drawing something, I am moving my body. There's more freedom. It's like easeful, and it's almost like different parts of my brain are being used a little bit. And so I'm curious if you have those like what is your body like almost in these different types of environments that you're creating in?
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would say I also get to that sort of like I'm filled to the top to the max that I can do things while sitting or like
Yeah, yeah.
pushing stuff around on a screen. And it almost feels like only my eyes and my brain are actually the ones moving. Like, yes, my
Yeah.
hand is moving a mouse and like some click keys and whatever else, but the majority of the effort is really coming from eyes and brain. And I absolutely get to a point where I'm like, I just need to get on a big sketch pad. Like for this public art project, I ended up buying like these massive, like 18 by 24-inch sketch pads, which in my fine art training would have been used for figure drawing or, massive drafting projects, right? But I'm like, these pieces have to be like, they are a maximum of 40 inches high. So, like,
Mm.
I need to physically think bigger. And
Yeah.
the idea of a thumbnail only being a 1 by 1 inch square is like, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. I need to get out of the small and get into the big and sort of give myself permission to draw at a scale, even while sketching,
Yeah.
that I honestly haven't done since college, which has been really
Mm.
interesting. And it feels so much more freeing. But then at the same time, I bought like a sketchbook that was like one size bigger. So, say like a 12 by 18. And even that, I was like, this is too small. I'm only running out of room. I need something bigger. I gotta go. I gotta go to the art store. What do we do it? When I'm designing things digitally, it's funny as you were explaining it, I was like, oh wow, do I just need to install a whiteboard in my art studio? Like my training over decades has taught me that the only place I draw sketches is on paper in a book.
Mm.
But my training in software and digital product design and things of that nature is like whiteboard, whiteboard, whiteboard.
Yeah.
So my default will be I'll get to the point where either I don't know enough or I need to explore a concept, usually with someone else that may not be on the design team, that may not be thinking of things in my own same perspective, right? Like I want to jam on that with an engineer or a product owner or somebody else to then like, all right, let's mass this out. Let's draw it out. Let's make crafty shapes
Yeah.
together. But then being able to draw arrows and mark things up, that stuff has absolutely like that has actually carried over from digital design into my fine art practice where like I make little notes for myself in ways that if I go back and look at my own sketchbooks from when I was a kid to like pre 2016, like I didn't really make those little notes for myself. But now I'm
Same.
like, we got real good as adults talking to
Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that was gonna be one of my other questions is like, how does your practice, your personal practice of creativity kind of influence your workplace practice and vice versa? Because I imagine it's very fluid. The things that you learn in one kind of touches the other because we are holistic people. They're not little distinct parts of our lives. But yeah, I'm curious if we can talk about that a little.
Yeah, yeah. It's always, I think that's one of the reasons why either finding your own path to meditation or recognizing when you have meditative moments where you're in that flow state, you're on autopilot, things feel very free flowing, is one of the best moments to recognize where you're taking what you learned by coaching your kid's basketball game and how it's showing up at work, right? There's
Yeah.
all of these interesting moments of transference that happens. I would say, I pivoted out of tech and working particularly in software and moved into this sort of interesting realm of community building and hospitality through commercial real estate. So I do co-working now, but we are physical space purveyors and the problems that we solve are so vastly different day to day, hour to hour, whether it's interpersonal challenges between clients or we're trying to figure out what's the right way to budget for a snack that the price increase has gone through the roof. But there's so much of that sort of like conversation, but also being very conscious enough to be like, everyone seems a little frustrated and we are getting stuck in our words. How do we get out of our words
Yeah.
and move over to the whiteboard, move over to, all right, everybody just stop, sit down and write. Like I have a directors meeting later this week where we're going to actually spend a good half hour talking about the definitions of certain keywords because it is pretty clear that we all have very different definitions of what it means to be collaborative,
Yep.
hospitality, yada, yada. And sometimes you got to play the hat game and everybody's got to write down their definition, put it in the hat, and then we read them out loud and figure out where is their organic alignment and where is their very disparate definition
Yeah.
that we actually need to figure out what our collective thought is on that thing.
Yeah. I feel like the work that you're doing is, well, the way that I've always thought of you is a service designer. And because it's what spans the not only the software but the physical space and the elements, and it sounds like the practices that you have taken from software design and create it's just it blends in this environment and this community space that you've created. So, yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's hard to like it happens over here and it happens over there.
Yeah. So far, we've talked about creativity and the different ways that creativity kind of emits itself from you, because I feel like it is an energy that comes out. Do you have a favorite chapter of creativity throughout your life? Because you've had so many, you've had like the baking business, you've had painting.
Oh wow. What a
Yeah.
question. There was a moment, the thing that comes to mind is a moment in time where I think many of us got pretty frustrated with the world thanks to the pandemic. So, like months leading up to that March of 2020, I was in the process of building an entire content series. So, like, there is a YouTube channel that has a bunch of my instructional videos on like the secret to making mid-century modern colors, which is like still gets comments and subscribers, which is really interesting. But I was in the process of trying to develop my work to then be able to apply to get into these very different kinds of art fairs and art shows. So when you think of fine art, you think of like the white wall gallery, and the artist is not necessarily there. There are newer style art fairs where the artist is present with their work, and you might get a 10 by 20 booth, but the walls of your booth are actually built like giant bulletin boards that are painted whatever color you believe they should be. and they are sometimes 20 feet high. And so you can
Mm,
create this sort of like instant gallery over the course of, say, 2 days, 4 days, however long it might be. And you get to interact with all of your patrons. And so at the time, I was out doing a ton of art fairs. It just became so satisfying to talk to people about the work, talk to people about art in general, learn like watch them look and see what their interpretation was of my
mm,
work or
mhm.
hear what it made them think of. And then based on what we chatted about, I would recommend them to go see other artists that were in the fair that were in different pockets. It was so rewarding to just have that be a constant part of conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas now I really have to like seek it out. I have to
Yeah.
reach out to the art friends to then say, "Hey, can we get together and meet at the RISD Museum and go look at the latest exhibit that's on view right now?" Or even with the manager's offsite that I held last month, we did a 2-hour working session. We all had lunch together, and then we ended by going to MIT has this incredible gallery called the List Center, but they had this immersive experience in one of their galleries that just felt like a home and an office sliced up.
Oh,
And so it
wow.
was very relevant to the sort of like the work that we do day to day in co-working and commercial real estate, but it was so experiential and it was so wonderful to watch my managers just walk through the space and have their own experience at the same time. And that just doesn't feel as regular as it did. So I think that's my favorite chapter is like I was so close to getting to that next place. And then, the world kind of went to hell in a handbasket. But now we're in this new chapter and let's see what happens now.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. It's interesting because I feel like COVID had such a profound impact on community and community spaces. That's usually what I find myself yearning for too. And like, I'm an introvert. I'm the introvertest of all introverts. And like, even me, I'm like, oh, hybrid sounds interesting to like be in a space again and be able to collaborate with people in real life and have tactile things and be able to shift. And I feel like that moment had made it makes all of us rethink the way that we're doing things. And even like motherhood has been a profound shift for me and like creatively, what am I thinking about? So I have a feeling you will have new chapters that will be very invigorating for you too.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
With all of your transitions around creativity, what are you working on now? I know you talked about the application, the final stages for the pieces you're looking at now. Are there other kind of avenues that you have to unleash your creative
Yeah,
spirit?
yeah. Before I was given this incredible opportunity to at least submit a proposal for this public art piece, I just went back to old school magazine tear outs and just have, I don't know if you can see it, but essentially this side, there we go. So those doors right there are covered in these like little magazine tear outs and different patterns and shapes. I really want to try, I want to experiment with integrating some realism in with the geometric abstract. And I've just been really drawn to sea creatures. I want to draw manta rays and koi fish, just different things that sort of like move through space in a different way. But it's also summer, and thinking about aquatic animals is just like a wonderful place to be mentally.
Yeah, yeah,
There's, like,
yeah.
both a quiet and a noise that just feels really, really calming and forgiving. So I've spent a lot of time sort of letting my mind do the subconscious process of just, like,
Mm,
mulling it over and seeing, like, what am I attracted to when I'm at a vintage market, when I'm in a gallery, when I'm in a museum? Like, what am I drawn to, and how did that make me think differently about how to move forward? And then the
yeah.
other thing I'd say is like I have an entirely different color palette. I really fell in love with what I'm gonna call saturated pastels.
Yeah.
Like, they're very opaque, and on the light scale, they're certainly, like, within that first third of, like, they're much more pale than what I normally work with, which is, like,
Mm,
juicy gem tones.
yeah.
But because of that, I spend some time at a paint center and just pulling paint chips because that can often be the easiest way for me to figure out, like, what is at least the 5 or 7 color sets that I wanna at least start with. And I would go to grab one of my, like, favorite teals and be like, "That clearly doesn't work anymore."
Yep.
So there's a lot of newness that's in the background that I'm very excited to just letting the process be as enjoyable as it is. Like, I'm not trying to add a ton of pressure to myself. I'm not trying to throw artificial deadlines. Just like when I want to actually paint, then that's when I'm going to sit down and really paint. Public art
Yeah.
project, however, has deadlines. Also has very different color constraints.
Yeah. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I'm curious. One thing you mentioned, you talked about like creative flow and intuition. I'm curious if you have any recommendations for listeners for how can they harness their creative energy or creative flow, like any tips or practices that people might be able to explore with.
There's two things that come to mind. One is I think everyone should read the book Blue Mind. It's an unbelievable assessment of the impact of water on our brain and how even if all you can do is look at a photograph of it and you're landlocked, it is going to do something so positive for the way that you feel mentally and physically. What reading that book did for me was increase my meditative perception. What I mean by that is it really caused me to step back in my body and just recognize, when am I spending more time looking at a thing, feeling a thing, thinking about a thing?
Mm.
When am I spending time appreciating a thing or a vista, a view? Being in Boston, being able to run the Esplanade and be around the Charles River always feels incredibly different than being like inside of the
Yeah.
mix of the traffic and the people and the buildings and all the other things. But there's this incredible sort of like positively musical hum that just happens when even I just have the opportunity to look out onto the Charles. And
Yeah.
so recognizing where you start to pause organically, not because you've asked yourself or told yourself that you have to, but
Yeah.
developing that self-awareness practice to be like, oh, that's interesting. I've been standing here looking at that branch for like over a minute. Why is that? That's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I should let myself do that a little bit more often.
Yeah.
So much of creativity is just observation and
Yep.
then just letting your brain find its creative obsession. And it doesn't have to have a rhyme or a reason. I feel like we have to associate some why or some value or some financial value to it. It's like, no, disregard all that you are pressured to think about in your daily life because we pay bills and we're adults and we have responsibilities. What are the moments where your brain is actually free of all of those things and just noticing something that is bringing you this like really subtle piece of joy, and that joy can just be calm, and that's important.
Yeah. I love that. That really resonates. And something that I miss, honestly, from the transition to motherhood, I used to go to meditation retreats like multiple times a year. I would have like dedicated time to meditate all the time. And now it looks very different where it's like I'm in the nursery chair and I'm just rocking like my son and like that's my meditative time now and the time to just be. It's very different. But even when you were describing like looking at a twig or like a tree, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that huh." It's a reset for the nervous system. Like, it really is, and it shifts your brain to a different mode.
Yeah.
How can people reach out to you, get in touch with you if they wanna stay connected?
Yeah, so Stacey with an EY, Messier, like my room is messier than yours.com. Website's great. Also, find me on LinkedIn under the same name. And oh, Instagram also. Stacey Messier Art is my handle on Instagram. And that's another great way to see what am I working on. I love doing shoots of basically like what is the current process as well as like the current project. And so would love to hear from your folks through any of those three means.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Stacey. It was such a joy to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Roberta.
Thanks for being here. If something in this episode landed with you, feel free to pass it along to someone who might need it too. You can leave a review, subscribe, or just keep tuning in. We're figuring it out together. And remember, your story, your voice, your becoming, it all matters.